I'm going to take you through what has really come from 25 years of coaching and mentoring. And prior to this, I was in the banking field for 15 years. And most of my time in the banking field was with small businesses. So I've seen everything you can about small business. And what I know is everybody who ever started a small business wanted to succeed. They didn't start the business with the intention of it being hard work and failing. Everyone wanted it to work well, pay them well, and to allow them certain freedoms. And I think a kingdom business should allow you even more freedom so that you can truly step into that assignment. And what does that freedom look like? Well, that freedom looks like that cash flow is not a problem and time management is not a problem. And when those two things aren't a problem anymore, we're no longer a slave to the business. We actually master the business. And then we have the ability to use our time and our talent, our money, to go and do the things that God really has in store for us. And so with this, it starts with what I call the setup. And when you get the setup right, and I'll go into this in more detail in a minute, you end up with confidence and a firm foundation to back the business vision that you have and move it forward. And then you need to get the right business model in place that allows you to make the money that you need to, which gives you certainty and leverage to build a business. And then all of this kind of melds into creating a game plan, which gives you traction, which drives you forward day by day, week by week. And my discovery from helping over 3,000 small businesses is that without these three stages, you're at high risk of being a statistic. And the statistics show us that 50% of businesses just don't make it. And that's not what we want, right? And the reason they don't make it is they're winging it because they never set things up properly to make sure it could succeed. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I believe that this concept that the Lord's given me, which is the Kingdom Business Foundations, He's given this to me to help give you a proven path to create a foundation that you can build a successful business from. Let's look a little bit deeper as to what this looks like. So here's the problem. If you don't get the setup right, instead of confidence, you feel overwhelmed. And I just see this so often. And it happens in two ways. It happens when someone's trying to start a business and they've got 1,000 ideas of what they could do and they're just overwhelmed with it. And then there's others who start a business, but they're overwhelmed with all the stuff that they have to learn because they just think there's all this stuff. Is there all this stuff? Yes, there is, but we don't need to worry about all the stuff. We need to just take one step at a time, right? And that's really what the next 10 weeks is just step by step. Don't worry about all the other stuff. We're just going to build it step by step, right? Because we want to make sure that you're putting the right stuff in place, not the wrong stuff, right? And we want to get away from the traffic jam that happens inside your head to, no, I just need to worry about the next step. The next challenge is if you don't get your model right, you're left in doubt about how is this business going to work? How's it actually going to make money? And so instead of having that certainty, there's all this doubt about what we're doing. And as a kingdom builder, we don't want to be in a place of doubt because doubt is a destroyer. It destroys faith, right? So we want to move past that. And if we don't create the right game plan, then quite often instead of traction, we're just stuck in the day to day. We're spinning our wheels. We kind of feel like we're doing the same thing and not really getting anywhere. We end up getting very, very busy and very, very tired and not really moving forward at all. So the thing here is we want to build a business that lasts, a business that has legacy, that allows you to do what God has called you to do through this business. And so we want to make sure we get the setup right, the model right, and the game plan so that we get the traction to step into our calling. So let's go a little bit deeper. This really is a bit of a deeper dive, right? When we get the setup right, the first thing is we need to get the dream and vision for the business. And it's my belief that the dream and vision for the business actually comes from God, right? It's not what you want, it's what He wants. And when we get that distinction right, it's much easier to build because we're now building His thing with Him rather than trying to get Him to build our thing with us, right? So we just need to get the whole system right. Then the next thing that we want to do is we want to validate the vision. And again, we're going to do this in a supernatural way and we're going to do it in a natural way. So we want to go through a process with God to validate it. We also want to go to the marketplace and validate that, hey, the way I'm about to go about this, is this actually going to work, right? And then we're going to research your market. And the reason we're going to do this is we want to make sure that there's enough demand. We want to make sure we are aware of who the competitors are, and not because we want to compete more against them. What we want to do is we want to discover the opportunity gaps in the marketplace, because that is where innovation happens, right? And that is a place that we can take kingdom advantage by playing the game a little bit differently. differently. And so when we get this right, we now have confidence because we know we've got the right vision. We know that the marketplace can handle it. We know God's behind it, and we know that there's gaps for us to seize, if that makes sense. So the next thing that we want to look at is the model. And to get the model right, we need to learn some business mechanics here, right? So the first one is about margins. How do they work for my business? And then we're going to look at a process of how do we maximize profits for your business so that you work smarter, not harder. And we're going to learn about how the finances work so that you can steward your business righteously. And this is actually much more important than most people give it weight. When God is helping you build your business, he is testing you at all levels. And he is seeing what sort of steward are you? And we've seen this in the Bible, and it doesn't matter whether you go to the parable about the miners or the parable about the talents. God is always testing to see, are you a multiplier or are you a waster, right? And the wasters are the ones that just don't use the talents effectively. And so we want to learn these principles of stewarding so that we get the right model that makes the right profit so that we can actually have a business we can build from certainty, right? A business that we can leverage from as we grow. And I've seen this when done right, time and time again, you can have explosions in your business in a good way. And all of you will end up with this book at some stage if you haven't got it already. There's a story in the back of that of a gentleman by the name of Peter Spark that I helped him go to a $25 million business. I've helped people go to $100 million businesses. There's another story in there of an electrician who was basically turning over just enough to get by, who right now will turn over $500,000 a month. These people have done this using this exact process here. Now, some of those people are not Christians. And here's the thing. If you follow the right principles, the righteous principles, you will actually do well regardless. But even more so if you're following God, right? Because we want God in all that we're doing, if that's making sense. And so then we come to the game plan. And to get that game plan right, we will be talking about how do we generate inquiries for your business? How do we make those inquiries count and turn into sales? And then what's the plan to build this business right out? So that's kind of the story that we're going to be building out 1 week at a time. We're not going to be worrying about week 2 till we get to week 2. We don't worry about week 5 until we get to week 5. We want to make sure that we're building a business that has traction. We're building a business that can fund our assignment. We're building a business that God himself is going, yes, you're doing it exactly the way I want you to do it. When we get these 3 stages right, we will have a business that works the way it's supposed to work. Here's the thing. As Christians, we are told to cast our anxieties on him, to, not worry about certain things. But it's easier to build the business properly so you don't have to worry about things that you should never have been worrying about in the first place, if that makes sense. And as much as we want to have the faith to, not have all those anxieties, if we build it right, then we don't have those anxieties, right? So we want to do both, if that makes sense.